This is the adult triple action ankle joint. We'll start by disassembling the component. Removing the upper bar is the first step in disassembling the triple action joint. To begin, we'll take a flathead screwdriver as large as can fit in this cam screw. The reason you want a large flathead is because anything too small could slip and end up marring the surface of this cam screw. So once you break the torque, and you can usually loosen this by hand or by finger, set that aside. Next, in your toolkit that comes with every triple action adult is a Torx head wrench. This is used on the pivot screw. Loosen that and remove the pivot screw. Put that back down. Now, if there's no stirrup, so there's no compression on the pivots, so these will be able to slide out. The backside one, we'll call this the female pivot bushing. And the front is the male pivot bushing. And you can, I don't know if you can see this that well, but there's an interface between the two. There's a flat that mates these parts together so they cannot turn independent of one another. And then that flat is also in the stirrup head. So the male goes through and is oriented the same way, like that. Now, continuing to disassemble. In order to remove the, well, now you can remove the upper bar. So let's take the upper bar off, set it aside. Now you can take your stirrup that comes bagged separately now and apply these to the fab kit, bend and adjust as needed. Now you'll notice there's this cam clip, which is an important part of this assembly. You want to put that aside. I'll talk about that later. So this is your triple action adult joint that you can set aside until we come back to your AFO and install it together. So next, if we want to see the inside parts of this adult triple action, I'll remove the alignment lock nut. So let's loosen that. When you loosen this alignment lock nut, this clamp here allows the cam bushing to articulate and can also be removed. Now, you can see as the alignment lock nut is tightened, it will close this gap, which in turn makes this diameter smaller, provides a clamping force onto our cam bushing that locks our cam bushing in place. Being able to unlock and lock our cam bushing allows for upper bar alignment changes. I'll show you that as we reassemble. So cam bushing is out. Let's loosen and remove the alignment lock nut. And now boosters are locked into place by a pin. So this is not removable anymore. Continuing on, let's take our 4mm wrench to loosen the first rocker set screw. That comes out. Then in our first rocker is our high torque spring and high torque pin, which is red, and then a 1/4 inch ball bearing. So that's in this first channel. Second channel, again with the 4mm wrench. Loosen and remove. This is a shorter set screw. And inside of the second channel is a longer R2 spring. And again, 1/4 inch ball bearing. And then I will not take apart the booster, but there's 2 springs in this top and then 1 spring in the bottom there. Important thing with the booster before any adjustments are made, this blue plasti dipped 1.5 millimeter wrench is used on the side range of motion lock set screw. It's important that this screw is loosened appropriately before any loosening or tightening of the booster is done. If this is not loosened, this range of motion lock set screw is not loosened, and the booster is adjusted in any direction, the threads will deform and gall inside of the first rocker of the adult triple action. If that occurs, there's no real way to save it, and that will require refurbishment on a replacement on the entire assembly. So it's very crucial that the smallest set screw we have is loosened before boosters are adjusted. Now let's reassemble and talk about some torque values. So just working backwards, we'll go ball bearing. If for some reason you need a replacement on this screw or on this spring, I'll show you, or any of our springs. Here is the high torque spring and the high torque pin. Before installing into your component, open your grease packet that comes with each adjustment kit and apply grease to the pin itself. The reason we apply solely to the pin in this situation is to lubricate the spring to increase the cycle life of these springs. And the reason we grease the pin by itself and not the entire spring is because we want to keep the threads inside of the joint body as dry as possible. If an excessive amount of grease is present in the threads with our reciprocating motion of a stirrup, putting a force onto our screw and then off and then on, if it's lubricated too well with grease, we actually have had some screw loosening in some certain scenarios. So dry threads, dry set screws are important. So now I'm installing this first rocker set screw. I'm not going to tighten it down too far, just putting it in place so I can continue on and nothing's going to fall out on me. Next, we'll do the second channel. Now this spring does not have a pin inside. So this spring is greased on the spring itself, but as the grease is worked into inside of the coils, after that, it is taken to a cloth and the outside is wiped down dry. So the same thing applies where there's threads in each one of these channels. We want to keep them as dry as possible. If you think there is a little excess grease in those threads, a Q-tip is a good way with any kind of acetone or denatured alcohol will remove grease from those threads and dry it out very quickly. Next, I'll install the second rocker set screw. This set screw is tightened to solid in every assembly. So we control excursion on this spring by the thread depth in the component body. So this set screw is tightened down until you can't tighten it anymore. Now we have our springs in place. Let's take our upper bar that's been bent, or it might be in an AFL. Install the back bearing into the back side of the upper bar, or of the component body. I hold this in place with 2 fingers and line up my cam pocket with the cam hole in the joint body. Then I'll move it up and hold it in place like this. Next, we will take some 3-in-1 oil, multi-purpose oil, on a Q-tip and touch the inside bearing area where these pivot bushings shoulders will be touching. And also we want to touch the flanged faces of it. This lubrication is important to increase the cycle life on these bearings and make them perform better for longer. Next, we'll take our stirrup, put it into the clevis, and kind of line up the hole in the stirrup with the hole in the front. Now you take your male pivot bushing, oriented so the flat goes through the stirrup. Now I'm in the stirrup, and lining it up and pushing it into the front bearing. Now flip it over while still holding on to the front male pivot bushing. Take the female pivot bushing, oriented the flats the same way you did the male. And this one might take a little bit of turning and wiggling to line it up correctly. But now it popped into place. Everything is locked in. Then we take our pivot screw, apply a little bit of blue Loctite to the threads, and screw this in. You can start with this wrench, but it is very important that this screw is torqued appropriately to 4 Newton meters. So take your torque wrench, put it on 4 Newton meters, and lock this down. This is crucial because if this pivot screw is not torqued correctly, it can loosen, and any loosening of this screw, say like that's even less than a quarter turn, allows the upper bar to move. That's a fair amount. And as this slop increases, it induces wear on these bearings, and almost immediately the bearings will open up oversized and you'll have stirrup slop and upper bar slop. The whole thing will tear itself apart pretty quickly. So let's retorque this back to where it's supposed to. Now you can see this upper bar is locked in place in ML, but still functioning fine in AP. It still can rotate around freely. Same thing goes with the stirrup. After this is torqued, we check the stirrup movement because we don't want any drag or any friction taking away any of our spring force that we've worked hard to give. After the pivot is now all set, we'll look at installing the cam bushing. So you take your cam bushing, apply just a little bit of grease to the barrel of the cam bushing, and even that across. And apply a little bit of grease to the lobe of the cam bushing as well. Now put the cam bushing with the lobe facing upwards through the joint body and into the upper bar cam pocket. Now the easiest way, so this is, if this is installed without the cam clip, you're going to have that much AP slop. This is a common error, is not, or losing this piece and then not installing it, obviously because it's lost. And then the clinician comes back and says, oh, there's way too much AP upper bar slop. And that's because this guy is missing or is not installed properly. So the easiest way to install your cam clip is to actually recess your cam bushing out of the upper bar. So in the upper bar, now I let it drop out so I can turn the upper bar away. So the upper bar is now against the flat of the component body. Put your cam bushing in, push it all the way in. The orientation is important. It's a horseshoe. The horseshoe faces down. And rotate your upper bar back over and apply just a little bit of pressure from the backside on your cam nut or cam bushing. And then once you see that cam clip start to move out of the upper bar pocket, hold it there and take your cam screw and begin tightening down the cam screw while holding the upper bar in place. As you tighten, the upper bar is going to want to move that direction because there's nothing locking it in place. This has not been installed yet. And a tip for this installation, if you can't tighten this down easily, then something's wrong and you should pull back out and reset and try again. If it continues to be a problem, there might be a burr or something's not seating correctly. And you'll have to take a good hard look at your upper bar, your cam clip, and your cam bushing to make sure nothing is scratched or worn or there's no burrs anywhere inside that assembly. So again, with your thick Phillips or flathead screwdriver, we'll tighten this down. Then let's orient. Our upper bar is now off center, so let's do an articulation check on our alignment. So we'll take our combination wrench, the large portion of it, and move through the range of motion to make sure everything's smooth, nothing's sticky. And then I'll reset back to 0. Now that we're at 0, we can install our alignment lock nut. So begin tightening that down. Now that that's ready to go, actually we want to 0 our spring range of motion now before we tighten this all the way down. I'll start with the booster. Let's just confirm that our range of motion lock set screw is loosened and this guy can turn freely. Now I'm going to tighten our booster down to solid. There we go. Then you can take your 2mm wrench to this top screw and loosen that. Now you can see there are numbers on this blue dial. We call this our range of motion dial. And our orientation that we recommend is putting that 0 degree marker with the side of the component. So side, rotate it up, there's 0 right here. Once you have that in place, hold it on with your thumb and tighten the top screw down. Now that's locked in place, it's not going to move. And then as you set your range of motion, whatever you want to start with, you can count with numbers reaching that same position that we zeroed before. So that's 1, 2 degrees, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So we'll go 2 full turns backed off, 10 degrees. Then just confirm that the second set screw is locked down. It is. Then on the third one, I'm going to keep my fingers onto the alignment lock nut. Otherwise, this, as you tighten down that screw, it'll also tighten the alignment, and you'll think you're on the bottom, but instead you've really just locked the component down and you can't tighten it anymore. So right there feels like it's locked, but in reality, I need to make sure this stays loosened. Then I can tighten it even more. So that's locked down. Now this first rocker, I'm covering up too much. We tune to 3 turns backed off when we ship assemblies. So half, 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5, 3. And now I kept my thumb on the alignment locking nut, so that didn't move. Then keep your 4mm wrench in, and as you tighten the alignment, see how it moved on me? I want to keep that in the same position as I lock down the alignment lock. So maybe that's easier to see from the side, but now I'm going to confirm my alignment tick mark in my upper bar is at 0. Now I'm going to hold that screw in place, or that wrench in place, so I'm not tightening the set screw as I'm tightening the alignment lock nut. Now, as I tighten this alignment lock nut, this clamp closes, which reduces the diameter of the hole that's in the component body and squeezes down onto our cam bushing. Now our alignment is locked in place. Confirm that. Actually, before you lock this all the way down, let's go back a little bit. If you're experiencing upper bar slop, in this case we're not, but there are certain scenarios where some wear might occur inside our cam clip or some other scenario. A good tip to remove upper bar slop is with the range or with the alignment unlocked, right? Apply a little bit of force to this back set screw, or this back cam screw, without touching the cam bushing from the front. So I'll push here, keep that free of touch. So what that does is it puts the force that you're putting on the upper bar against the joint body by removing slop and allowing the cam bushing to move forward. So after you do that, you can tighten down your alignment lock, which will clamp your cam bushing in place. And so all that slop that you brought out by putting that force on the cam screw is now locked in place, and now your upper bar is rock solid. So then put my tools back. I'll do a stirrup check, make sure there's no slop in the ML, AP or ML. Same thing, upper bar. Then I'll articulate as far as I can to make sure I didn't forget balls or pins and springs, things like that. Then you can take your alignment. Actually, let's torque this to what we're supposed to. So this side set screw is torqued to 0.5 Newton meters, I believe. So let's go. This is 4 inch-pounds. There. Now this is locked into place. And that is a fully assembled adult triple action ankle joint with boosters.